The bitter aroma of burnt espresso hung heavy in the air of the small Coral Gables cafe. Isla adjusted her oversized sweater, trying to hide the 5-month curve of her stomach that felt like a lead weight against her aching spine. She was exhausted, her fingers blurring over the laptop keys as she rushed to finish a legal translation. She had no choice. The rent was due, and her unborn child's future depended on every cent. The chime of the door was followed by a sharp, mocking laugh that made Isla's heart drop into her stomach. Isla? Good God, is that actually you? It was Julian. Her ex-husband stood there, a glamorous, thin woman, clinging to his arm like a trophy. He looked at Isla with a mixture of disgust and dark amusement, raising his voice so the entire cafe could hear. You look pathetic. You've gotten so fat, Isla. Yes, I knew the divorce would hit you hard, but I didn't think you'd just give up on life and start eating your feelings. You're practically unrecognizable. Does it ever stop? The cafe went silent. Isla felt the heat of 100 stares burning into her skin. She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white. She couldn't tell him that she wasn't fat, that she was carrying a life he didn't deserve to know about. When Julian stepped forward, reaching out to mockingly shut her laptop, a shadow loomed over them both. A voice, cold and sharp as a shattered blade, cut through the room. Pull your hand back, now, unless you'd like to lose the ability to use it. From the darkest corner of the cafe, a man rose, Dante Vane. His presence was suffocating, his eyes like polished flint. He moved with a predatory grace, in stepping beside Isla like a mountain claimed by the sea. Julian's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated terror. Part 2. The silence in the cafe was heavy, broken only by the sound of Julian's frantic, uneven breathing. Dante Vane didn't need to raise his voice. His stature and the cold vacuum of his presence did the work for him. With a jerky, terrified nod, Julian stumbled backward, nearly tripping over his own feet as he dragged his girlfriend toward the exit. He didn't look back. Isla sat frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She stared at her laptop screen, the letters blurring. Suddenly, a large, warm hand settled gently on the table next to her coffee. It wasn't threatening, but it was possessive. Pack your things, Dante commanded. It wasn't a suggestion. I can't, Isla whispered, her voice trembling. I have to finish this. I have bills and Dante leaned in, and the scent of expensive sandalwood and dark tobacco enveloping her. You are shaking, Isla, and you haven't touched your coffee because it's been cold for 20 minutes. My car is outside. You'll finish your work in a place where men like that don't dare to breathe the same air as you. Before she could protest, one of Dante's men, a silent shadow in a charcoal suit, had already gathered her bag. Dante guided her out, his hand hovering just inches from the small of her back, a protective barrier between her and the world. The drive to the outskirts of the city was silent. They pulled up to a sprawling estate, hidden behind iron gates and weeping willows. It was a fortress of marble and glass. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of fresh lilies. Why are you doing this? Isla finally asked, as they stood in a vast library filled with leather-bound books. You don't even know me. Dante turned, unbuttoning his suit jacket. His gaze dropped for a split second to her stomach, a look so sharp she felt exposed. I know you better than you think, Isla. I've been reading your translations for months. You have a mind that is too precise to be wasted in a corner booth of a third-rate cafe. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a low growl. and I don't like seeing things that belong in my circle being mistreated. I don't belong to you, she breathed, her pulse quickening. Not yet, Dante replied, a ghost of a smirk playing on his lips. For now, you are my guest. My sister Bianca will be here shortly. She's the best attorney in the state, and she's going to ensure your ex-husband never bothers you again. In exchange, you will work for me. Over the next few days, the golden cage began to close. Isla was treated like royalty. Private chefs prepared meals rich in the nutrients she had been neglecting. Bianca arrived, a whirlwind of sharp suits and sharper tongue, already filing restraining orders and financial audits against Julian. But as Isla sat in the sun-drenched garden, she noticed the men on the perimeter. The weapons they carried weren't for show. She realized she hadn't just moved into a mansion. She had moved into a war zone. And Dante Vane wasn't just a businessman. He was the law in the city. She was safe from the wolf at her door, but she was now living in the lion's den. And the lion was starting to look at her with something much more intense than professional interest. Weeks passed within the marble walls of the Vane estate, and the tension between Isla and Dante grew like a gathering storm. Every time he entered a room, the air seemed to vanish. He was a man of few words, but his actions were loud. He watched her eat, ensured she rested, and personally reviewed the legal documents Bianca was using to dismantle Julian's life. But Julian was a man backed into a corner, and a cornered rat is always the most dangerous. One evening, while Dante was away on business, Isla received a notification on her phone. It was an anonymous video link. Her blood ran cold as she clicked it. It was Julian, sitting in a dimly lit bar, speaking to a man whose face was obscured by shadows, a man with a distinctive tattoo of a coiled viper on his neck. "Ian, I don't care what you do to the girl," Julian's voice hissed through the speakers. "Just get me the flash drive she's working on. It has the Vane shipping manifests. And if she gets hurt in the process, consider it a bonus. She's carrying some brat that's probably slowing her down anyway." Isla's hand flew to her stomach. Julian didn't know the child was Dante's, but he was willing to trade her life to the Viper Syndicate, Dante's most ruthless rivals, just to settle his own debts. Panic surged through her. She tried to find the security detail, but the house felt unnervingly quiet. As she turned to run towards the heavy oak doors of the library, the lights flickered and died. The estate's backup generators hummed for a second before they, too, were cut. In the suffocating darkness, the sound of breaking glass echoed from the foyer. Niece Isla retreated into the shadows of the bookshelves, her heart hammering so hard it was a physical pain. She heard heavy boots on the marble floors. Not the disciplined, rhythmic step of Dante's men, but the chaotic, heavy thuds of invaders. "Find the girl," a gravelly voice barked. "The boss wants the drive and the woman. Move." Isla squeezed into the narrow gap behind a hidden panel Dante had shown her, just in case. She held her breath, tears stinging her eyes. She thought of the life growing inside her, the only pure thing left in this dark world. Suddenly, the door to the library was kicked open. Flashlight beams sliced through the dark like searchlights. "She's not here," one of the men growled. "Check the gardens." She couldn't have gone far in her condition. As the footsteps retreated, Isla felt a cold hand suddenly clamp over her mouth. She gasped, ready to fight for her life, until a familiar, deep scent hit her. Sandalwood and gunpowder. "Don't make a sound," Dante's voice vibrated against her ear, low and lethal. He pulled her out of the shadows. In the dim moonlight filtering through the windows, he looked like a god of war. He was wearing a tactical vest, a suppressed pistol in his hand. But it was his eyes that terrified her. They weren't filled with his usual cold calculation. They were filled with a burning primal rage. "Julian sold you out," Dante whispered, his grip on her arm firm but protective. "He told the syndicate about the manifests. He thought he could use you as a bargaining chip." "Dante, I know," he interrupted, his gaze softening for a fraction of a second as it landed on her belly. I've known since the cafe, Isla. I didn't need a test to know that child is a Vane. And no one touches what belongs to me." He handed her a small device. "Go to the safe room behind the wine cellar. Stay there. My men are clearing the perimeter. This ends tonight." "What are you going to do?" she asked, her voice trembling. Dante checked the magazine of his weapon with a chilling click. "I'm going to show Julian what happens when you mock a queen and threaten a king's heir. Retention hook. The stakes have hit their peak. The betrayal is out. The pregnancy is confirmed. And the Viper Syndicate has brought the war to Dante's front door. The audience is now waiting for the final confrontation and the ultimate revenge." The safe room was a silent, reinforced vault. But Isla could still hear the muffled thuds of suppressed gunfire echoing through the vents of the mansion. Every minute felt like an eternity. She sat on the floor, her hands protectively cradling her stomach, whispering promises of safety to her unborn child. Outside, the estate had become a graveyard for the Viper Syndicate. Dante moved through the halls like a phantom, his movements precise and merciless. He didn't just want to stop them. He wanted to send a message that would echo through the underworld for decades. Finally, the heavy steel door of the safe room hissed open. Dante stood there, his shirt sleeve torn and a streak of blood across his cheekbone. But his eyes were calm as he looked at her. "It's over," he said simply. "Julian?" Isla asked, her voice barely a whisper. Dante stepped inside and knelt before her, taking her hands in his. He tried to flee with the Syndicate's survivors. He didn't make it past the gates. He died believing he was a player in a game he never understood. You never have to hear his voice again. 1 year later, the sun was setting over the Atlantic, painting the terrace of the Vane estate in hues of gold and violet. Isla sat in a comfortable wicker chair, watching a small boy, Leo, kick his legs in a mahogany cradle nearby. He had Dante's dark hair and Isla's spirited eyes. Dante stepped out onto the terrace, shedding his heavy suit jacket. He didn't look like the cold man from the cafe anymore. When he looked at Isla and the baby, his face softened into something human, something vulnerable. "Bianca just called," Dante said, leaning down to kiss Isla's forehead. "The final transition of the shipping firm is complete. It's all in your name now, Isla. You're no longer just a translator. You're the CEO of the most powerful logistics empire in Florida." Isla smiled, reaching up to touch his face. A year ago, she was a fat, discarded ex-wife, struggling to pay rent in a corner booth. Now she was a mother, a mogul, and the only person in the world who could make a Mafia king bow. "I guess the stress eater did okay for herself," she teased. Dante smirked, picking up his son and holding him against his chest. "You weren't eating your feelings, Isla. You were growing my world. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure no one ever forgets it. If you enjoyed this journey from humiliation to ultimate power, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of secret heirs and high-stakes revenge. What would you have done if you were in Isla's shoes? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a chapter of the Vane Empire. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.